I think in most things in life, just try to figure out why you are the way that you are. Because regardless if it fits into what society tells you is the correct way to live, you should be aware of why you react to things the way that you react. Know your inner child, because that's usually why you react to things the way that you do. And regardless of what society tells you, regardless of what society expects of you, knowing why you are the way you are is a massive tool. And it's not to say you should ever justify who you are, but just be aware of who you are. I think self-awareness is always the most important thing, because you might not be able to change who you are, but you should at least know who you are to some extent.
Yeah, because how do you know what to change?
No, you have to triage. You have to do a lot of triaging before you can actually start to take movement or change your momentum and inertia.
Welcome to It's Both, the podcast where we explore the messy, beautiful contradictions of being human. I'm your host, Nikki P, and each week I sit down with real people navigating life's complexities. Those moments when life isn't just one thing, it's so many. And this week I sit down with my friend Devon to talk about themes around masculinity, parenting, and personal identity. Devon shares his experience as a stay-at-home dad, and we talk about this ever-evolving role of fathers in modern society. He also talks about the complexities of navigating workplace expectations around men, personal values, and the challenges of assertiveness versus aggression. And he shares his experiences and insights around navigating identity, the importance of self-awareness, and even the concept of the shadow self. So let's jump in. So good to have you here. And I feel so lucky that you have your own podcast, which we'll talk about a little bit, but I get to have you on my podcast, which is exciting.
I know. How do you feel about nasally NPR voices? Because that's what you'll have to listen to a lot whenever you edit this one.
Perfect. Great. I mean, you know your strengths. You know what you are. I love it.
That's true. I have a voice made for radio? I don't know.
Well, we are going to talk about masculinity today.
Yes.
Which, I know very little about. So I'm excited to hear from you. But before we jump in, I wish you would tell everybody a little bit about who you are. Who is Devon?
Sure. Yeah. So I am Devon. I have 3 kids. I have a 9-year-old, 7-year-old, and a 3-year-old. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I've been a stay-at-home dad since February of 2019. So a while now. I do co-host, produce, do all the stuff for a podcast called the Imperfect Dads podcast. It was originally the Nashville Dads podcast. I just recently moved out to Colorado or Denver suburbs. And whenever we did that, it felt weird to still have the name the Nashville Dads, even though one of us didn't live there anymore. So in my opinion, the idea or hope of that podcast is that I genuinely believe dads really care about their families, and how they normally show that they love their families is by working, creating financial stability, and doing all of that. But they normally don't get asked directly hey, tell me some stories about your kids' lives. Mm-hmm. And once you open up that space for them, I feel like dads are it's almost hard to get them to stop talking. But I think culturally, societally, the concept for a man is to go to work, come home, drink a beer, and fall asleep in a chair while your kids annoy you in front of you. And I'm that's maybe at one point in time, that's how dads were. But every dad I know cares so much more about that. I feel like when I go to field trips, I am not so much the dad at the field trip, but I'm a dad at the field trip. And that feels very different than what I remember from my childhood growing up.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I don't remember any dads on any field trips.
Nope.
Ever.
Nope. Unless you had donuts for dads or, some event like that. That was the only time your dad would step into the school sometimes.
When it was very specifically required and asked for the dads. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know, it's, we all rise to whatever ceiling is set in front of us. So if you look at a man and you say, you don't need to be here for this, they don't show up. So if you, I guess the way I've figured out how to put it that I think is good is whenever you show someone that their love and their care is welcomed here and it makes a difference, you can see what it, their energy changes for it. So if I can somehow figure out how to communicate to dads that there's how they love their family is good, and it's good for them to show that in more ways than just working a lot, then my hope is that it creates more emotional bonds and more emotional strength and makes dads not feel alone as much.
Yeah, I love that. And
Thanks.
The podcast is great.
Thanks. Have you listened to any episodes of it?
Actually have, but
oh my gosh.
I know. But to be fair, I don't listen. I think I was saying this a little bit earlier. There is not one podcast that I listen to that's consistent.
Yeah.
I pop in and out of
sure, yeah.
every podcast. And That's just kind of, and yet I'm starting a podcast. So,
Yeah, man.
that makes sense, right?
I mean, from what I've found, if I overanalyze stats, it's all guest based.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're lucky enough to get a guest that people know, then you're like, oh, a lot of people listen to this one, and you're
Mm-hmm.
like, cool, this one connected. The next one, who knows? Just doing what I can to represent stories and represent people well, and listeners happen if they happen. So yeah.
So, that's a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit more, just like the things you like, little quirks about you, a little bit about your
Hmm.
personality,
Okay. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
deeper stuff.
Deeper stuff. Yeah. Yeah. If you want to do an Enneagram speak, I am an Enneagram 4, with a very strong 5 wing. And how I trust my creativeness the most is actually in cooking and in baking. So if you ask me to sit down and write a song, I'll be like, no, I'm not going to do that. But if you're like, hey, can you bake me a pie? I'll be like, sure. Do you want like 5? And I'll make them like the most unique tasting and most delicious thing you've ever had in your life. Um, I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I am an extreme music nerd. Studied music business with an emphasis in production. So I have a business degree, but I spent all my time hanging out in recording studios. Prefer mountains to beaches, hence the move to Colorado. What else? Youngest of 3. Um, I have a
I
lot of.
didn't know that.
Yeah, did you think I was an only child? Yeah.
Did I not know this?
Why would we discuss my siblings,
I don't know. Well, we've talked about Heather, your wife's
Mm-hmm.
siblings. Yeah, I
Yep.
don't know.
Yep. No, I have a sister who lives in Nashville still, and my brother lives in just moved to Manhattan. So yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
I shared a room with my older brother for most of my upbringing. He's 6 years older than me, and that's where I have my taste in music, is because whatever he
Cool.
put on the CD player is what I listen to. So being in 3rd grade and listening to like Radiohead, Violent Femmes, and Sublime instead of NSYNC and Backstreet Boys
Mm-hmm.
was most of my childhood.
Love it. So, okay. Talk to me a little bit about when we were setting up this podcast, we were talking about a subject and we kind of got to the idea of masculinity. I just want you to start sharing, like, tell me a little bit about your story. Like, why did this come up for you? What is masculinity for you? And how does that show up?
Yeah, of course. No, I think if I think of something where there's like the normal and what's expected of you, and then there's you, and I'm trying to figure out who I am and what that is and how do I balance all of this, I do think masculinity is definitely that, because like I am. Whenever I think of a typical definition of masculinity, it's more like the alpha male.
Mm-hmm.
Guy who comes in, takes charge, knows what he wants, blah 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 blah, aggressive. And I walk into a room and I'm like, what's the vibe?
Mm-hmm.
Like, who's here? Who can I talk to? What's going on? Like, I don't like, and that's just always been who I am. And like, that's definitely gotten me like not in trouble, but like working at jobs. I think most people, I'm not stupid. I'm intelligent. So people are like, oh, he's smart. He's going to take charge here. And I'm more walking and I'm like, what's everyone else want to do? Let's figure this out together. As opposed to like, what is considered leadership and masculinity is always fascinating to me, because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like people, if someone comes in and goes, this is how we're doing it and this is the right way to do it, people are like, that's a strong leader. And I'm
Yeah.
like, or he's an asshole. Like,
Yeah.
which one is
Yeah.
like, which one is it? He's like, he didn't ask me my opinion. Did he ask you your opinion? No, he knows based off of his previous experience, this works. So he's going to come in and demand this is what we do. So like, I've never done well with that energy. I've never gotten fired because of it, but like, it's definitely like, I remember working at a job in which I did customer service, and I would always slouch in the chair, but I would answer like every phone call, every email, I'd take care of every order. And the owner, who was more alpha male energy, was like, why is he slouching in his chair? And my manager would have to be like, well, he's doing everything you ask politely and our customers love him. It's like, well, he's not doing this one thing the way I want him to. And
He's
I'm
not
like,
sitting how I want him to
he's
sit.
not sitting up straight and proper like this. He's doing this. So like, I don't know, like it's this weird, I don't want the word passive has such a negative connotation to it, but I have more just
Mm-hmm.
like, let's see what happens energy, which is not, if you think of a typical masculine person, I don't think passive is like a word you to describe them as.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. Well, it's interesting that you use that example with leadership because, like, coming from the nonprofit space, most of the CEOs are men. Um, and however, I've seen that change in the last like 5, 6 years a lot, especially in Nashville. And one of the nonprofit that I work at, one of our last CEO was so quiet and so soft spoken. you could never hear him. And
Seriously? Yeah.
you never, like, we'd have to give him a microphone in a small meeting room. And it was so different, like, from the CEO prior to him. At first, people would come in with these assumptions and be like, who is this guy? Like, how on
Mhm.
earth is this the CEO? And then he would speak with such kindness and like warmth and care. And he just like moved you. And you were like, oh, that's a great leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it took people a while, even in
Hmm.
a nonprofit space, to be like, well, yeah, great leadership isn't just coming in and
Bum, bum, bum,
inserting
bum,
your
bum. Yeah.
opinions on everybody else.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, I think that also, like, I think it's hard or very difficult. I would never, leading a company is not something I would want to do because you are constantly faced with very difficult decisions and you have to create the path and go forward. And then you're asking people to follow you. And like, I mean, that even applies to parenting is like, you're like, hey, we're going to
Yes.
do this. Let's move across the country. And your kids are like, is this a good idea? We hope it's a good idea. So like, you're trying, I
Yeah.
think typical masculinity kindness isn't something I usually associate with it. You know, it's more of like a fall in line or else type of mentality, which just makes me even feel deeply uncomfortable to say out loud. And that's just never, if the only way you can move forward is if you remove the ability to have a conversation about it as you do it, I can't agree with that like at all. That's so, that feels so inherently wrong to me.
Yeah. Well, you've talked about what others' perception of like
Mm-hmm.
the typical masculinity is like. When did this start to come like to a head for you? Or when did you start to realize like, oh, hey, I don't align with like that version of masculinity?
I mean, it's pretty much, I mean, realistically, it's been my entire life to some extent. You know, I can't think of a time in which I fit in with like the normal definition of masculinity. I think definitely once getting married is whenever I started to hit my head against it the most. Heather, my wife, and I will always talk about the best thing we did for premarital counseling was we had to go through our family structures and because that naturally
Mm-hmm.
would kind of be a roadmap to what we anticipated. So, like for Heather's family, a lot of them were all stay at home moms who gave up on their career to take care of their family. On my side of the family, it was mostly women who, after having kids or in their 20s or 30s, went back to college and got an education and went back and like got bigger jobs. So to me, I was like, hey, if we get married, you'll probably want to be career focused and like this will be fine. And she was used to like, oh, you probably want me to stay home and figure out all the home stuff. And I'm like, not really. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
good. And like I think in general, most church structures are very much like, hey, you're the man. You need to be leading and you need to be providing. And the more we got into our careers, the more like Heather's just better at jobs. She's better at career than I am. It's just the reality. She was able to find jobs in which she could advance and financially advance as well. And I would get to like middle management level and not like rise above that.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I mean, me becoming a stay-at-home dad was definitely a huge shift or redefining of like, hey, as a man, I assume I'm supposed to be the one who figures out how to provide financially for the family. And the reality is that like you just change your definition. Like the how you provide for your family is actually case by case. So
Mm-hmm.
like me providing for the family now is to be around, be emotionally and mentally available as much as I can be, and just provide basic house stuff. Like, do we have snacks? Do we have food? Like, what is it like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Like, just get
Mm-hmm.
that base level as strong as you can is what I'm like, oh, this is where I'm best to be providing for my family. It's not to go out there and make, I mean, I think it'd be, if I could ever find a job that, you know, made six figures, was all this stuff, that'd be awesome. But it hasn't worked out that way. So I think you definitely reach a point in your life in which you just have to look at yourself and be like, hey, this is who you think you're supposed to be. And actually, it's not who you are. So why do
Mm-hmm.
you keep constantly running towards something you aren't able to become because you think it's what's expected of you?
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think like thinking back to childhood, I mean, I'm assuming I could be wrong here, but like did this pop up as you were a kid and a teenager and like in those years where I would imagine like masculinity and expectations around that was very specific, especially in I don't know, the
Yeah.
90s or 2000s?
Yeah. Yep. Early aughts. Yeah. No. And also, like, just to go back to more or less me sharing a room with my older brother. I have a May birthday. So from my class, I was always one of the older kids, not one of
Mm-hmm.
the younger kids. That's how it worked out. And all the stuff I liked was about 6 years older than everyone else that I was around. So I've always been slightly not the same as my peer group to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
Also, might lead into the whole being an Enneagram 4 thing. So like, yeah, whenever I was in like high school, I'd be listening to like all these bands that were different than what everyone else was listening to. Like I would always be the one being like, have you heard this band, to all my friends, and making them come along with me for it. So like I'm used to getting obsessed with something and people looking at me and being like, what are you talking about? What is this? And then the people who know about it are usually 5 or 6 years older than me. So like, yeah, growing up like I've always been more like analytical and ethereal inside my own head. So whenever I'm around other boys and they're like, let's go play basketball, I'm like, but what's like the meaning of it? Is time a flat circle? And it's like, and then kids are like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, sorry. No, I'm supposed to be liking music. I'm supposed to be like shooting basketball. You're right. No, you're right. So
okay, wait. So were you kind of like an emo kid? Or was that ever a phase? Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, okay. So if you want to get super into this, whenever you say emo, are you thinking like My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, and all the stuff that was on like TRL and all of that?
No.
Because I didn't wear eyeliner. I didn't have all that stuff. Okay, cool.
I didn't have that experience either. Like a lot of, I think the people that I was around, that a lot of my friends were very similar to you, that were boys and were emo, and I would say more in touch with emotions.
Yes. Yes.
But no eyeliner, no nothing like that.
Okay, cool. Because there's like, when people say emo, I think they think My Chemical Romance on Fall Out Boy, which is like the black eyeliner and all that stuff. And I'm like, no, I more listened to a lot of folk music that was sad and somber. Like I started listening to Bright Eyes like in 6th and 7th grade.
Yeah, yes.
So which a lot of their songs are butting up against religion and why do we exist to some extent. So yeah,
a lot of existential questions there.
Pretty much. And like literally, I remember my brother, whenever I was in like 3rd grade, because he would have been like about to enter high school, being like, yeah, but like, what if God isn't real? Like, what if all of this isn't actually a real thing? And that's what I started to process, is like, why do we exist at all in general, whenever I was in like 3rd or 4th grade? So more bigger thinking, whatever.
Yeah.
Which then leads to like, I think whenever you are questioning constantly why you exist, in my opinion, it does make you more like, it made me more passive, because I'm like, well, if nothing matters, then why would I do anything at all? So very nihilistic to some extent. Yeah, I was a nihilistic 5th grader. You weren't? Come on.
No. I was other end of the spectrum, heavily like youth group. Yeah, we don't need to go there.
Yeah, but, I did youth group stuff too, but the entire time I was like, is this all bullshit? Which is great, so.
No, I was very in it. Yeah.
Were you? Okay.
So did that, because we're not only talking about masculinity, it seems like there's masculinity is a part of this, and then there's just your personality as well in that. Yeah. But did the, in thinking about masculinity specifically, especially in those like teenage years, puberty years, how did that like affect relationships? Like, I don't want to say romantic because you're like a teenager necessarily, but romantic or friendships, like even with other boys at the time, or like your family, did any of that get affected?
I feel like I mostly just found other people who like the same sad music as me, and were in like I was friends with like the band kids, not like the jocks or anything like that. I was actually talking to a guy the other day about how it feels funny whenever you're like 17 or 16, you don't think it's allowed to be someone who likes basketball and likes to play sad songs on guitar. But now here I'm at 37 and I'm like, I watch soccer all the time. I watch basketball. Like I'm very into sports and playing sad songs on guitar. But whenever I was in high school, it was like, no, that's the jocks world. That's different than mine. And it's like, it's both.
Yeah.
You can be both. No, I think I just more like, cause I played soccer in my senior year of high school, and yeah, I was drastically different than the guys who were better at soccer and more aggressive minded. Because I was just like, I'm going to be here and I'll kick the ball if it comes near me, so I'm not, I think you can enter into a lot of spaces where it's not that like you being different is bad or goes against something, but it's just very obvious that you're different. So like me being a stay-at-home dad, I never go to like a story time and the moms look at me and go, why are you here? But like, we all know I'm one of the only dads in the room,
Yeah. And I'm assuming you haven't always been comfortable with like that difference.
No,
right?
Not at all. No. Like I'll go back to like church scenario, like a church scenario, whenever you're like getting married and you're starting out young and everything. And the church leader's like, how are you going to be the man of your house? And you're like, what does that mean? Like, and then you're like, but how are you defining that? Like, are you saying like, how do I tell my wife what to do? Like, no, I always felt against what people expected of me in church culture and in job scenarios, because I would be like, but that's not how I think this should go. And I feel like then people would be like, this is the right way to do it. And I'm like, no, that's just your opinion of how to do it. And that's why I wasn't very good at careers, because people would be like, this is how it should be done. I'm like, actually, my vantage point is different. And they'd be like, well, that's not what I want. And I'm like, but it's not what, if you're asking me what would I do, it's nothing that you decided to do.
Mm-hmm.
And to say that not condescendingly, I don't know how to. So
I was
there
gonna,
you go.
okay. Well, and that was the question that came up as you were saying that is like, how does this, so let's take work for example.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's say you're back in the workplace at one of the
yeah,
jobs that you had and you had conflict, or you had somebody say, you need to do it this way, or I think you should do it this way. And there, the rub comes, right? You're like, no, how do you handle that situation? Especially considering that, I think traditional, in quotes, masculinity would have been aggressive and been like,
yeah,
no, this is blah, blah, blah. Like,
yeah.
how's your response and how is that different?
Passive and people pleasing. So it'd be more like, well, you pay my paycheck and this is what you want. So regardless of if I agree with it or not, I would like to still make money. That's why I have this job. Like I worked at a dentist's office and they had a very distinct script if a new patient called of what they wanted you to say and a flow and everything. And if you deviated from that, you would get in trouble. Like they would listen to your phone calls and stuff. And I would consistently deviate because I like their thought process was if someone's calling with an issue, get them in the door because that's the best way to help them. And I'd be more like, whoa, that's happening to you? Are you okay? Like, I would lead more with empathy on the phone call, which would then leave me on the phone call longer. So if other calls came in, like, I understand their reasoning. Get on the phone, get them scheduled, get them in, you're good. But like, in my mind, I was always like, no, this person is calling with a horrible toothache. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure they know if they're taken care of, they'll be taken care of. And so like, no, I got in trouble all the time for that because they would be like, just follow the script. And I'm like, but I don't agree with your script. Okay, well, you're going to keep getting in trouble. Cool. I will learn how to quiet what I think is right in this scenario because I would rather not get fired because that creates more problems than me, quote unquote, being right.
So essentially it was like, okay, you're going to say something in a as non-condescending of a way as possible. And then if there was pushback again, you would just kind of go, okay, I'm
Sorry,
going to work
I'll
on
be
it.
better next time. I'll be
Yeah.
better next time. I'm sorry about that. Hey, here's why I did it. Here's my reasoning. But you're right. If that's what you want, I understand that. I will do better to do that next time.
It's also a side note crazy that like a dentist cares that like
Yeah. Well, they had hired a marketing team, and the entire marketing team's job was to get new patients in the door. So they had they paid someone to overanalyze every phone call. So I get the flow. I understand all of it. But yeah. So, I mean, I feel like moments like that would happen, and which would be like, hey, why did you do this way? And I'm like, I mean, it's not even just masculinity because it's personality as well. To be like, well, it's what I thought was the best way to do it. And then, yeah, it is weird because like if someone's like, well, I don't like how you did that, the more masculine way would be like, well, this is how I'm going to do it. And I'm more inclined to be like, all right, let's work this out, this compromise. We'll figure something out together. And also, like, I don't like whenever I have to dig my heels in because then I don't like who I am whenever, if I dip into what I would consider to be alpha male characteristics, I don't like that about myself. I don't like whenever I walk into a room and I'm like, I'm going to dominate what I want needs to happen or else. Then I'm like, I don't like getting into that mindset because I think I'm ignoring everyone else's needs in the room besides my own. And I'm like, I don't like that. I can do that. I just really, I'm not a fan of this. It's like, I guess through therapy, you either like aggressive, you're passive, or you're like it's like how do you make it a win-win basically, or assertive. That's the word.
yeah.
So I'd rather be assertive in which I know what I want and then communicate it properly. But it's easier to either think I should be aggressive or passive in the moment.
Yeah, that's so interesting as you're saying that because so are there moments, or I'm assuming there are moments where you have felt like you had to be that sort of alpha male, or you felt kind of pushed in a corner to that? Like, is that very often, or is that very rare? Like instances where
It's pretty rare. It's not very common. And in those moments, I hate it because I would rather, like, in my mind, I'm just like, why do we have to get here? Like, this all could have been avoided, couldn't have? Like, I like to release pressure valves as they're happening, as opposed to the big fight and the big moment. If I possibly can, that's a little idealistic as well. But like, yeah, no, like I remember, I don't like whenever, if I have to sit you down and be like, hey, do you know that this hurt my feelings when you did this? I feel my body feels tense. I hate that entire moment. I hate everything about that. So yeah, I guess in a lot of moments I end up being more passive and being like, it's for me to figure out on my own, as opposed to like confrontational. Because confrontation, I have to remind myself, is a good thing for relationships. Like to actually have a confrontational moment is actually something that can lead to growth in the relationship. And I'm like, but that's a risk and that's vulnerability, and I don't want to take that. So yeah, or sometimes I don't.
yeah, I mean, 100%. I think Bennett and I would both agree with that. Like we both
Yeah.
struggle with that piece, which is not a good, like we've had to work through the
Hmm.
combo of that, because usually you've got somebody who's like willing to push into it a little bit. And I think I've defaulted to that now, but both of us tend to be like, oh, we don't want to like confront the thing, right?
Yeah.
We're just going to deal with it on our own. And we've been also working through that both as well. Like, no,
Yeah.
you need some confrontation. Like conflict can be good. Conflict is not bad. It's how you handle that.
Pretty much. Yep. And I think that's where like learning about communication styles of being like assertive, meaning learning,
Mm-hmm.
knowing what you want to say in a situation and sticking to it, not backing down. I hate that wording, but like being like, hey, this is how I feel about the subject, and this is how I feel, but not coming about it. But I guess whenever you're assertive, it's almost like, here are my needs, here are your needs. How do we meet them together? As opposed to my need to be met and yours can't, which is somehow relationships end up. That's the power dynamic of them.
And I like the one word that I figured out with my therapist is
Yeah,
grounded. Like
grounded.
instead of
Yeah,
the I'm sticking my ground, we're gonna like I'm not backing down. It's like,
yeah,
no, I'm grounded. And like
yeah,
I'm not, you can't move me from this because it's a
yeah,
need of mine. Now I can move in all the other ways to meet your needs, but like I can't, this is a need.
yeah.
But how do we meet in the middle?
Yeah, it's real fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I've found that either I'm prone to passive or being passive more than anything because I just assume. I mean, yeah, that I'm just supposed to. If something makes me uncomfortable, I'm supposed to figure it out on my own to some extent. You know, for whatever reason, I don't think that's a healthy way to do it. But like, I worked a lot of. Whenever I worked, it was always like, let me rethink this. A lot of what my position in something has always been reactive. So like working customer service jobs. Here's the catalyst, here's the complaint. You go figure it out. You're at home with kids. Here's what the kids did. You have to figure out how to help them out, how to help them regularly and everything. So like in most of my modes, I am in more of a like ready to respond as opposed to what do I think needs to happen. Like instead
Mm.
of like dominating the energy saying what should happen next. Besides like plans during the day. Cause I'll be like, this go to the zoo, you know, stuff like that. But like in most frameworks, I expect that I should be reacting to something to help it out, you know?
Hmm. Rather than setting the course per se.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Hmm.
Well, one thing you said earlier that I am now thinking about when you, and I don't remember how you worded it, but you said something like, I try to release the pressure along the way as opposed to like letting it all out at once. So uh, talk a little bit about that, because I think, masculinity or not, but I think you see this more with men, or maybe historically, just because of the expectation, or the acceptance of like anger being okay to come out in a explosive way or a loud
Yeah.
way, right?
Yeah.
Um, and also, but though the expectation with that is that it's probably not okay for men to release it slowly along the way, because that shows up in other ways, like probably sadness or other feelings of hurt or grief or whatever that aren't as acceptable. So how have you learned over the years to let off the steam as you go, as opposed to like that big explosion?
Yeah. I think it's just trying to be more aware of what I can control in a situation and what I cannot, which comes with its own sets of like good and bad. Because I usually am prone to take responsibility for things that I'm not actually responsible for. But it's just that inner work of being like, all right, this really pissed me off. Cool. Why did it piss you off? How much of that are you responsible for? And how much of that is just life? Because I think that happens in life in which things happen. You're like, I really didn't like that this happened. So what could have gone differently? And it's like, that's just life sometimes. Sometimes stuff doesn't happen the way you want it to. And if you're assuming that that your actions would have moved in a different direction, that's not always the case. So I think it's just trying to be honest about situations and what role did I play in it? What role could have been different about it? And like what actions am I actually responsible to them? As opposed to assuming this is all yours to fix. This is all broken because of you, which very much a younger version of myself would have been like, hey, this is all broken because of what you did. And as an older person, I'm like, actually, no, there's a lot of other factors. Like to some extent, not as harsh as it sounds, like you're not that important. Like there's so many other
Hmm.
things that
Hmm.
factor into it. If you think this went wrong because of just you, most situations that's not the case. There's some situations, yeah, you totally messed it. Like you didn't call and schedule something and now you can't go to it. That's totally on you. But like I think just trying to be more aware of how many things play a part in it allows me to not be as angry, you know, to be more
Hmm.
like, hey, this is more than just you. So like stop. I think whenever I think something, it rests solely on me and it's only because of me that something happened or didn't happen, then I'm more prone to bigger reactions, bigger like, why did this happen? But if I can stop and think and be like, hey, this is actually, there's a lot of factors in this, then I'm usually a little bit kinder, more accepting, and chill about
So
it.
if I heard you right, when you think it's mostly your fault before you start to break it down, that's when you have the bigger
I
reactions.
think so. Yeah, yeah. Which you can also do Enneagram speak there as a 4. I assume I'm naturally broken in everything I do. So my starting point is like, this is broken because of you and you are broken. And then it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. There's not a lot of truth in that. Calm it down. So like it's I think it's very helpful to be aware of what your gut reaction is and respect it, but that doesn't necessarily define where your actions are going forward. So if you start in a place of like, hey, I think I'm broken and I'm going to break everything, it's like, no, you're not. Like, you're fine. You can admit that's your initial reaction. Now take a breath and figure out what else you can
Mm.
do.
And that's so insightful and self-aware, because I feel like what you're probably talking about is it's like the shame and the guilt, which
But yeah.
honestly, that's, if we're all pretty honest, that's usually the biggest reactions we all have,
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
anything that's creating that feeling of guilt, shame, embarrassment, whatever it might be for you.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. How do you, if you're on a shame spiral, how do you stop the spiral? And
Yeah,
it
how
is possible to just take a
for
breath.
you?
I mean, let it go. I don't know, Elsa. Let's see. It's I think whenever you're shame spiraling, it's because you aren't. God, I'm not meaning to reference Frozen. Um,
Please
but
do.
you
I love it.
but you are legitimately looking for what your next step is. What is the next what is the next thing you can actually do? And I think that's where most of people's shame, or mine, and shame spiraling comes from, is you're like, oh my God, I don't know what the next step is. I don't
Mm.
know what my next move can be. So then you spiral and you get deeper and deeper and deeper until you figure out how you can start climbing out of the hole. And there's not like a answer that goes across the board for how you get out of a shame spiral. But I think what you're looking for is, what's the next action step I can take to counteract this energy? And that's why you spiral, is because you can't find it yet. And you're spinning out until you find a step that you think can actually help you out.
If you're like me and dinner time creates so much anxiety and stress, and you have very little time, especially if you have kids, from the time you get home until bedtime, let me suggest Hungry Root. Hungry Root has been a game changer for our family. Every week I go in and I pick out our meals for the following week. I get to select 4 servings, which is huge. A lot of delivery services don't allow for multiple servings like that, but it's enough to feed our family. They are really affordable. They're significantly cheaper than what you would get with some of the other subscriptions out there that tend to be very pricey and fancier, I would say, than Hungry Root. But it also offers a lot of healthy options. And so you can pick different dietary restrictions. Like, I usually always select anti-inflammatory for the family, which is like a lot of fish, a lot of veggies, a lot of chicken. But you can also select vegan, vegetarian, high protein, gluten-free, all these different variations that you can choose from. That's affordable, it's healthy, and almost every single meal is less than 30 minutes to make. And oftentimes, if it's more than 30 minutes, it's just the bake time that takes a little bit longer. The prep time on almost all of these meals is very minimal, that even somebody like me, who has self-proclaimed that I do not like to cook because it creates anxiety and stress in me, I can even make these meals. It's been easy on my husband, who's the one that cooks, because I prepare ahead of time like what the recipes are going to be. I pick them on Hungry Root, and I choose things that are easy for his preference, that I know him and the kids and myself are going to like. And it's made our dinner time routine so much easier in a way that none of the other subscriptions have. And it's yet still affordable, as if we were going to the grocery store and getting our groceries. So if you want to try it out, I highly recommend it, regardless of if it's just you and a partner, or you and kids. It works for any size family, any size household. And if you're interested, you can click the link below and get $50 off your first box. So for you in this moment, I don't know if there's an example, like, what's the biggest trigger for you? Is it kid? It doesn't feel like it's kids. It feels like you're so good with
No,
kids.
yeah. I think if I think back to working stuff that made me genuinely mad, would be like, I am a very calm personality. So people consistently wonder what I'm doing or if I care. So like, there's a moment whenever I worked at a TV station, I was a sales coordinator, which means people go out and sell ad time. You have to input into a system so I can blah, blah, blah. So I was doing that job. I did local sales. The person who was the national sales coordinator was out that day. And I was filling at the front desk because the employee was the front desk person was going through chemo. So I was helping out on all of that. So I was answering phone calls, welcoming guests, inputting orders, doing all this stuff. And someone was like, you don't seem like you're that busy out there. And I'm like, all right, so I'm doing like 3 jobs out here at like 23, 24, and like not complaining. So like, if you want to question that I'm working and that I care, like, I don't know how to respond kindly in that moment. And then I'm like, why can't you figure out how to communicate that nicely? I'm like, because it's offensive that they said that I'm not doing anything out here.
Mm-hmm.
So I've run into that a lot of like, I'm doing stuff like, I'm always like, do I have to complain? Like, if I complain more about stuff that I know I can do, does that make people like, why would I need to do that? And that makes me genuinely mad, because I'm like, no, just like know that you asked me to do something, I'm doing it. Just give me that respect. So that doesn't like make me spiral, but that does get a big like emotion inside of me that's like, how dare you type of moment, you know? And then I have to like calm it down, figure out how to communicate it. But like, yeah, that's it. If you're asking what's a moment that causes an immediate big reaction inside of me, if you're like, what are you even doing here? I'd be like
questioning your,
okay.
Yeah. So whether it be work, or not that I would ever see Heather doing this, but a partner or somebody close to you, like, or even just not that they're actually questioning you, but like you feel like they're questioning whatever's happening. Yeah.
And which, if it's like, I have to prove that I did something that mattered, you know, then I'm like, oh, that's just offensive to me for some reason. But also like, I understand other sides of it. Like if Heather were to come home, the house is completely destroyed, kids are fighting and stuff like that. And then she's like, what even happened here today? Then my first inclination isn't to be like, hey, here's how the day flowed. It's to be like, you know, like to respond more like emotionally, or not as level-headed as I would like to.
Yeah.
But I don't have like, I usually don't have big emotions, and or I don't express big emotions. And that does lead to some moments of conflict with people like, why doesn't anything faze you? And I'm like, why? Like, because it's just life. Things happen. Like, it'll all be okay. But then I feel like I'll get a question of like, but do you even care? Because you aren't having big reactions. Because I think usually big reactions is how you show you care about something. And I'm like, no, I just let the course play out. Like, it'll all be fine.
So do you have, I mean, I definitely don't feel like I've ever seen you have a big negative reaction.
Nah, not really.
Do you stay sort of in that like middle range, even with happiness and like joy?
I do. Yes. Okay. Which is also then confusing to people, because they're like, didn't you really want to go to that concert? I'm like, I did. Did you like it? I enjoyed it. And they're like, expected more range from that. Do you actually remember? Okay, I'm going to do a personal moment between us. Do you remember whenever I picked you up from the airport and a car cut us off while I was driving your van? And
I do.
In the snow, and I was just like, that's happening. And then like avoided the wreck and kept driving.
I do. Because I even said something. I was like, wait, that was your reaction?
I was like, oh, they're doing that now. I'm going to do this. So yeah, no, like I'm pretty much at all times, which I use a lot of words. And I think that's why, is because I know I don't emote a lot. So I'm like, cool. So how you communicate to people that you care, or your anger, something like that, is through your words and your tone of voice. So I try to be in tune with what words I use, my word choice, and my tone as I talk. Because like, if right now you're like, hey, Devon, here's free tickets to go see your favorite band ever, be like, oh, that's really nice. Cool. That's great. I'm excited about that. Thank you.
Which it is funny because, I think when you think of the traditional masculinity profile or whatever, that does seem to be different from what traditional, and I hate to say that because like, that's not how I see masculinity. And I think society is changing a lot in this sense, but it still exists very strongly.
Yep.
And so how do you feel like you're at peace with this idea? Are you still kind of like in that tension of the expectation versus who you are, or how is that for you now?
Yeah. I think I don't feel as much tension with it, because I'm very confident that who I am is what helps support my family the best at this point in time. And I think that's what really, because no matter how you define yourself or anything in the world, it's how is it defined to the people you actually care about is what matters. So I know for like my wife and I and the family, this definition of masculinity and what I am is what's helpful the most for them. And like, if that somehow changed, then I'd go back to that tension, trying to figure it all out and everything. But like, at this point in time, I know that who I am, what role I'm playing in my kids and my wife's lives is actually beneficial to them. And if it wasn't, then I'd be like, oh crap, I need like change this. I'm creating bad vibes. I'm like ruffling everything. How do I change this? But also still, like, if I talk to a man who's in his 60s or 70s, like, and I say, I like am not that I'm hesitant to say I'm a stay-at-home dad, but I do feel my energy change. If they're like, what do you do for a living? I'm like, oh, I stay home with the kids. Then they're like, oh, okay, I worked my whole career. And I'm like, hey, that's great for you. So, those are the
Yeah.
only moments where I'm like, how is this person going to respond to me? Because most dads our age are like, oh, that's the dream. And I'm like, sure, it's still a lot of responsibility that
I was going to
you
say,
currently aren't responsible, like you currently wouldn't be willing to do. So
I love my kids so much, but that's not my dream. Like,
yeah.
that's not everybody's dream because it is incredibly hard. It
Yep.
is so hard.
Yeah. It's just you. I think I'm very aware. Maybe it's my nihilist third grade self, but like I'm very aware of like there's only so much you can control in your day to day life. There's only so much you can control of another person. So it's more about just creating a structure and a framework they hope they can flourish in. Because like I can't control if Josh is in a good mood today. I can't control if a kid is like nice today. But what I can do is try to set them up for success as much as possible, and then just nudge them whenever I think they're being a jerk.
So does it trigger you when people like when you're like, hey, I'm a stay-at-home dad, and there's ever a reaction that is like, oh, or I worked my whole life. Like, is that
Yeah.
triggering?
No, I'm just like cool. So, like it's not to make it somewhat political. I whenever we got married, we paid off all of our student loans, and whenever the government started paying off student loans, I remember one person was like, "Oh, don't you wish the government would have done that for you? What about all these freeloaders?" And I was like, we paid off our loans because we knew there was a path in front of us. If other people get to do that, in which like the government helps them out, that's awesome. That'd have been great if I could have had that. It's not what was in the cards for me. So I'm not a very envious person. Like it doesn't reside in me. So like, yeah, if someone was like, oh, blah, 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 I'd be like, cool, that's the hand you're dealt. This is the hand I'm dealt. And like, how about we focus on how we're making it work as opposed to how you wish you had what I have. And I wish like, why get into a comparison mindset whenever like that, there's already so many opportunities to not get along with people. I try to not lead with like, hey, here's how you're not going to like me,
Yeah. What do you feel like? Because I think this is probably a big one, I would imagine, especially with masculinity, like being a stay-at-home dad. What are the assumptions, the incorrect assumptions
Yeah.
that you feel like you often get responded with?
I will tell you a story that I think is fun. That doesn't involve me, but whenever we had a dog, I remember taking her to the vet, and the vet assistant there, who was training to become like a full-time vet, was like, I was like, I'm a stay-at-home dad, blah blah blah, and she was like, oh, my boyfriend or fiance would love to be a stay-at-home dad. Not that he doesn't have any ambition, not that he's not ambitious, but also though, like that's the assumption. Like, okay, cool. If you are giving up a career to stay home with your family, you must not be a ambitious person. And in reality, I'm not an ambitious person. Like I'm not. So like that doesn't offend me. If you're like, Devon, you need to be CEO of a company, I'm like, I don't want to do that. That sounds like a lot of work, and you could pay me a lot, but I bet I would hate every moment of that. So I think that's the one I can think of immediately is if you're a stay-at-home dad, well, don't you have any ambition? And it's like, yeah, it just looks different than what you think ambition should look like.
And it's interesting because I've never heard somebody make that assumption or say that to a woman.
No, never.
Or
no,
a mom who stays at home. I mean, there's a lot of other assumptions made that, on that side, but like, it is interesting. Ambition is not one that I've heard of with a mom staying home.
No, but there's also I am not a fan of stay-at-home culture for the most part because I started staying home whenever our second child turned 1. So we both worked full time for like a full year, and like, oh my God, this is way too much. How do we change this all up? Because I didn't feel like it was sustainable. And we, figured it out. But like, I am still consistently aware or remember the days in which we would get home at like 6 p.m. with both kids and be like, cool, these kids need to be in bed by 7. No one's taken baths. No one's eaten any food. And like, how do we fit in what should be 3 hours of work into 1 hour, connect with them, connect with each other, and like enjoy this at all? So I'm like, oh, I'm perfectly happy to be a stay-at-home parent because that's what I feel like I'm avoiding. I am not doing that nighttime routine anymore because I stay home. So I'm like, that's really nice. I don't really feel like I have much to complain about being a stay-at-home parent because of what I know I'm avoiding,
I don't fully understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So let me try to rethink this.
So you're not avoiding the bedtime routine? Is that what you're saying?
The stress of both parents working. So like whenever you both are getting home, like I don't have to deal with that anymore. So like anything that would be a normal like inconvenience of being a stay-at-home parent, I'm like, sure, I'm dealing with this, but also though, I'm not working a full-time job while also trying to like, whenever you both work, the time you actually have with your kids during a day is like 3 hours, maybe four.
Not even. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think even that.
So like all of that stress we don't deal with anymore. So like
Gotcha.
I don't actually feel like being a stay-at-home parent isn't draining to me. And I think part of it is because of my personality, but also I consistently remember what it was like both of us working and how much stress that was and how like I felt like I wasn't doing anything right. I feel like I wasn't there enough for anyone or anything. And like being a stay-at-home parent is like, oh no, I now know what actions I can take to help out against that, you know?
Gotcha. Yes, that does
Yeah.
make sense. Yeah, because, and that's kind of where now, luckily, Bennett and I have very flexible jobs to
Yeah.
some degree, and he works from home. But there is still that, like, oh my gosh, the intense stress of the like getting out of the house in the morning
Hmm.
within a certain time frame, and then, oh man, the coming home, like it's the witching hour of just the commute, the traffic, kids are
Yep.
decompressing from school,
Yeah.
and then you get home, and I think, yeah, we probably have, it's right at 3 hours.
Yeah.
And that's not even for the youngest because he goes to bed earlier. So it's like 2-ish hours to get some energy out, take a bath, maybe. Most
Maybe
time we don't,
every other night. Yep.
yeah, oh, that's better. We have like Monday, it's like Monday and Friday they have to wash their hair.
Okay. Yeah.
The other nights they at least have to wash, like, we try to
Yeah.
wash the body in between there.
Basic maintenance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But that does make a lot of sense. And so other than ambition, like, are there any other like big things that come up for you, or in the past, maybe not as much, about being a stay-at-home dad that really like the misunderstandings or the wrong assumptions about that?
I will say one thing I run into that's always funny to me is how many other dads are like, "Oh, he's living the dream," and then I always want to be like, "Cool, would you be willing to quit your job and do this?" And almost every dad's like, "Oh no, I wouldn't be willing to do that." And I'm like, "So why are you idealizing something you're not willing to do?" You know? And I'm sure some of that's because of finances and all of that, but like. I have met a lot of dads who that'll be their first response, like, "Oh, that's the dream, staying home with the kids." I'm like, "Oh, would you quit your job and do it?" And they're like, "Oh, no," and I'm like, "Yeah, like you wouldn't."
Why do
So
you think that's the response? Like, oh, that's the dream.
that's
Like,
a
what?
dream.
Where's
I
that come
think
from?
I think they're trying to communicate support is what I
Mm,
hear, is what I'm trying to hear in it. That's the generous read. Is they're like, oh man, you get to be around for your kids, you get to be around for the big moments. I work full time. I don't always get to be there for those moments. That's great. You get to. That'd be awesome. Like I bet that's a dream to be able to do that. That's what I hear it as. That's what I've interpreted it as. So but yeah, I also don't know. I mean, does a working mom go up to like a stay-at-home mom and it's like, oh, that's the dream to stay home with the kids? I don't. It doesn't. I don't feel
mhm.
like I'd be surprised if that was the same. So
I know I haven't said that to a stay-at-home mom, but I don't know if that exists. I mean,
yeah.
I, I will say I have heard it from women who, I don't want to make assumptions here, but like women who don't have kids, I have heard them say like, "Oh, all I want to do is be a stay-at-home mom."
Oh yeah.
And then they have kids and they're like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Yeah, like I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's it's beautiful and it's wonderful, but it isn't also this like it is a job." And I don't know, I mean, would you agree with that? Would you describe it like that?
I think you. I feel like being a stay-at-home parent is you're also kind of like on call at all times. So like you're
Yeah.
trying to create a structure of what you can do with your days to make your kid have fun, enjoy themselves, maybe educate them a little bit, but also know that you're on call at all times. So like I'm not just taking care of the 3-year-old who's at home. I'm also like, wait, when are doctor's appointments? When are dentist appointments? If a kid is sick at school, that's all on me to take care of. So like I don't know. I think hopefully it's like not as much of an assumption of like if you're a stay at home parent, you just sit around and watch TV all day. If
Yeah.
anything, it's like you're figuring out how to entertain a smaller version of yourself who isn't emotionally regulated. Not that you're emotionally regulated, but so you're
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
and I mean, for me, the only thing that makes it really hard for me personally, I think, to make that switch, at work, and I think a lot of us that you don't realize until you have kids, and maybe you don't ever have kids, but like at work, you can disconnect for a while.
Yeah.
Everyone, we all know how many actual hours a day we work, even at a 9 to 5. You maybe work, what, 3 or 4 of those, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't do that when you're home with kids. Like, especially not when they're young. As they get older, yes.
Yeah.
But
Different.
like when you've got a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old,
Hmm.
no, you can't zone out. Like there is no
Yeah.
zoning out or
Nope.
turning your brain off for a moment. And I think that's like for me, that's the hardest thing to think about is like, oh, you don't get the 15-minute break, or
Not really.
you don't get that unless they sleep.
Or you
if
turn
they
on a
sleep.
TV. Or you turn on a TV. Those are your two options are begging for a nap or you turn on a TV, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for like a good hour of television in the afternoon because realistically, if like all the kids wake up at 6:30, by the time it gets to be 1 p.m., we've been
Mm-hmm.
doing stuff for like 7 hours. You know, like
Yeah.
we've already done a full day. So I'm like, cool, let's just do an hour for you guys to like watch TV and for me to like zone out or not be fully responsible for you for a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think you can communicate to someone. I always try to like tell dads that whenever they're about to have a kid is like, hey, you've never been fully responsible for something that has no ability to be independent. And you're about to realize you're about not like as a threat, but like you're about to realize what that actually means.
Mm-hmm.
And also like there's gonna be a month or two in which your wife's body is wrecked. So like you're there's gonna be a lot more needs of you than you realize. So like
Mm-hmm.
the best way to support your wife and your child is to just know that for a couple of months you need to be giving as much as you possibly can and just know it. Just go into it being like, hey, there are going to be a lot of needs I can't predict, but the best way to love and help my family is to support my wife and that'll or to meet as many needs as I possibly can for my wife, and then it'll all be good.
Yeah. So do you feel like through having kids and through, Heather being in that postpartum phase, like did any of that shift your relationship with masculinity? Because I could see how it could,
Yeah, I
especially if you're
think
stepping into more of that space where
yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of times men maybe don't or haven't in the past.
yeah. No, it's if you look at older generations, I've heard lots of stories where like people's dads legitimately never changed a diaper, right? Like their our grandparents or stuff like that, where the dad was like, I didn't change, I never changed a diaper before. And I'm like,
Hmm.
how could you like
How?
whenever like
Yeah.
I distinctly remember whenever Holly, our oldest, was like a newborn, I think Heather had finally fallen asleep and like Holly then woke up even though she just fallen asleep. So she was a winter baby. So I remember putting her in a stroller and walking around circles in our house because it was too cold to go outside in hopes that Holly would fall back asleep so Heather could hopefully get at least 30 more minutes of sleep. And I'm like, so you're telling me that other men in this situation would have just woken their wife up and said, hey, the kid's awake again? Like, until it's been 30 minutes of me failing at comfort techniques, I'm not waking you up. I'm going to at
Hmm.
least try it for a little bit and hopefully not make like, I've also had that experience with a newborn in which you are trying comfort techniques and everything just makes them more mad. And then you do have to wake up your wife and be like, hey, or partner, and be like, hey, nothing I do works. And like, that sucks. That's not fun for anyone. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it happens sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and when you came to that decision you talked about earlier, like, okay, we were both working. I guess it was after Magnolia, right? That was when
Correct. Yeah.
you, okay.
Yep.
Was there how did that conversation go with like, hey, we need to make a change? Did you know, like, I want to be the one that stays at home? Did Heather assume she was going to have to do it? Or like, how
But
did
yeah,
that conversation go?
it was since we had Holly, it was always a thought of like, what if this made sense for me to stay home? Heather's always made more money than I have. So it's like partly a financial decision, which is just kind of black and white. Like her salary is this, my salary is this. Which one can you live off of? It
Yeah,
helps
it's,
answer a
yeah.
lot of those questions. Um, no, so even whenever we had Holly, it was kind of like when we had Holly, we still had student loan debt, and then we finished it and paid it off, and then we like went under contract to buy a house. So then we're like, hey, my salary really helps with all this stuff, and then so yeah, there was always like a bigger financial need. So then we just reworked the budget a ton whenever we decided for me to stay home to be like, all right, what do we eliminate so we can afford like our house and food, and then we'll just live kind of like very restricted, and hopefully you end up making more money. Um, so no, it wasn't honestly the decision for me to be the one to stay home was kind of always the plan, just based off of financials of like, here's how much she makes, here's how much I make, what makes the most sense. And like
Hmm.
then you factor in personalities and stuff like that. Also, I'm much more of the two of us. I am the personality who is better suited for it. You know,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You are very, so for everybody listening, you watched our oldest daughter,
I
Sophie,
did.
for, gosh, it was,
A year and a half maybe.
yeah, because I think it was until COVID, until everything shut down and like we were home anyway.
Yeah,
And she was born in 2019. So yeah, it was about a year and a half.
yeah, it's a good year and a half. Yeah, yeah. And then I also watched another friend's kid for like a year and a half also
Yeah.
because daycare in Nashville was a second mortgage.
Oh, it still
Yeah,
is.
yeah. So that's part of it. Yeah,
But I bring that up because I remember, and even when we'll have like, come to your house with all of our kids, like
yeah,
you are just so even keeled, so
yeah,
calm and, cool and collected when, I get that like visceral body reaction when I have three. I don't know how, because I don't feel that loud and emotional, but maybe I'm lying to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I have very, very loud children all the time, very energetic and expressive, and I'm, what are other strength-based words
Yeah, yeah,
for?
yeah. There you go. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But it's like, and then three of them at the same time under six being loud. I'm like, I don't know how you do it. Like, I don't know how you
yeah.
keep your cool.
You just,
I don't.
you're just, no, no, you're just very confident that you're going to let someone down at all times, and you just accept it, and you're okay with it. Oh, cool. I didn't listen to that kid. Cool. I'll come back later and like try to connect with them then. Cause like in the moment for you to expect that you can be everything to all your kids at that exact moment, you can't. So it's like, all right, cool. You started talking first. So this finished your sentence. Hold on. I'll make sure to get to you. I feel like I'm a press secretary is basically what it feels like a lot of the times.
But then
Like I'm
add
feeling,
in like the kids running at the same time. How do you be a press
yeah,
secretary when they're running?
for whatever reason, I've been lucky that my kids don't need to expel energy a ton. Like they aren't the very like they need to get the wiggles out. That's never been a thing. If anything, we're like, how do we get like we bought a trampoline, go jump on? Like it's more
Mm-hmm.
that our kids love to like read books and play with Barbies, and like they'll do that for hours or cars. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
All right. I'm still trying to figure that one out because there's so much
Eh.
energy and
But also, like Sophie was
never.
very different at my house than your house. Like in my house, she would like go to a pile of books and sit there and read them, and I'd like make a loaf of bread.
What?
Yeah.
What are we
Yeah.
doing wrong, Devon? Tell me.
I don't know.
You're
Nothing
the
is
kid
the
the
answer.
kid guru over here.
Yeah, whatever. But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's what my memory of her is just like her coming over, finding a toy and playing with him. Maybe like, hey, I'll be over here, like just putting bread in a bowl or like
Mm-hmm.
making bread. Do you want to help me? She's like, no. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm over here. Do you need water? Do you need snacks? And she's like, no. I'm like, cool. I'll do this quickly.
I'll say Sophie alone is a whole different Sophie
Yeah.
than Sophie around siblings. They are
Yeah,
two
totally.
different
Yeah.
people.
Yep.
So I think as we're kind of like wrapping up, when we think about Lord, the tension or the bothness of this idea of masculinity, how do you, and you've talked about it a little bit, but like, how do you deal with the both? And what I mean about the both, and at least from my perspective, you tell me if I'm wrong or other things that come to mind, but like you are masculine, but you also aren't in the traditional sense. And that kind of competing thought, even in those conversations when you're telling people like, oh, I'm a stay-at-home dad, and like even the tension and the stuff that comes up for you in that moment throughout your life, is that something you were very aware of in the moment, or has that been later? Oh, I've done some processing and work through it, and I realized I was dealing with all of these things at the same time.
I think, let me think.
That's a big question.
No, no. As a kid, I definitely didn't understand it. All I knew was that I really liked sad music and I wasn't very like athletic, you know? Like
Mm-hmm.
I like skateboarding and like weird music and stuff, but I didn't know that what I was going up against was what the societal expectations of me were and how I didn't fit into them. And now, like, I guess there's like, as an adult, I'm just kind of like, oh, cool. Like, I am, one person explained it to me or I thought it was cool. It was like, oh, so like if your son ends up being more traditionally masculine and you aren't traditionally masculine, like you're actually just giving your son like the whole range of what a man can look like. So you're keeping like you're allowing them to see that it's not just like this cut and dry definition of what masculinity is. I was like, yeah, that's a generous read. I'll take that.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And is there anything I guess you would say to somebody who is struggling with this idea of, their identity around masculinity? Like, what would you say to them
Yeah.
on
Just know
on
your.
either end of the spectrum?
Yeah, yeah. I think in most things in life, just try to figure out why you are the way that you are. Because regardless if it fits into what society tells you is the correct way to live, you should be aware of why you react to things the way that you react. Know your inner child, because that's usually why you react to things the way that you do. And like, regardless of what society tells you, regardless of what society expects of you, knowing why you are the way you are is a massive tool. And it's not to say you should ever justify who you are, but just be aware of who you are. I think self-awareness is always like the most important thing because you might not be able to change who you are, but you should at least know who you are to some extent. So
Yeah. Yeah, because how do you know what to change?
you have to triage. You have to do a lot of triaging
Yeah.
before you can actually start to take movements or change your momentum and inertia.
Yeah. And you can't really, I mean, you could do some like behavioral changes, but without really knowing the reason
Yeah.
why. And I think to your point of that inner child work, like it's
Yeah.
hard to get to the core of actual change without knowing
Yep.
that.
Pretty much. Or you just create a rule and then whenever you break the rule, you feel shame and guilt.
Mm-hmm.
So which then once again, what were you taught as a kid? Don't do this or else. And then you feel shame and guilt. So yeah, just try to figure out who your inner child is. And that's probably why you keep butting your head against things.
And anything that has helped you feel more confident in who you are and not
Oh,
question it as much.
yeah. Mostly Franciscan monks. So Richard Rohr and
Mm-hmm,
Thomas
mm-hmm.
Merton and Richard Keating. So I feel like all of those guys are very much just like, hey, you were made the way you are. You are filled with flaws and you are beautiful the way you are and you are loved. And I think Richard Rohr is like the gentle elder who tells you you're being an idiot in a way in which you know you can do better. And
Mm.
I'm just like, yeah, man, I think they're the type of like eldership or whatever you want to call it in which they will point out flaws to you in which you actually want to address them as opposed to hide them. And that it like Breathing Underwater is like one of the most important books to me, Falling Upwards. Yeah, just tons of Franciscan monks. That's
Mm-hmm.
basically it. Yeah.
I like that because it's so true. When somebody tells you that from a place of love and
Mm-hmm.
kindness, it just makes all the and authenticity. It makes all the
Yes.
difference.
Well, it's also like, I don't know, if someone tells you you need to be better, they also have to communicate whenever they say that in a way which connects with you, that they believe you can be better than what you are. Because I feel like some people are like, hey, you need to do this differently. And you're like, you don't believe, like, you don't,
Mm-hmm.
like, you fight against it. But like, there's some people out there, whenever they say, hey, if you make these changes, this is what can happen for you, in which you actually believe the version of you that they see. And then that's such a rare thing to find.
Mm-hmm. And well, I mean, this podcast is called "It's Both," and I think of Richard Rohr and the idea of the both and it is, as you're talking about this, I'm like, you're both good, and you could be better.
Can we talk about Carl Jung and shadow work? Can we just like get into that to
Yes,
end it?
yeah, let's do
I
it.
am we won't, because that'll be another chart. I think shadow work is extremely important. I think
Mm,
being aware of who you are, and I think, if you want to say that with masculinity as well, I think as a kid, I was taught, or whatever, that I was taught like, if something is wrong with you, you need to conquer it and you need to defeat it. And I'm like,
mm,
no, it's who you are. Like, it's part of you. And like, you don't conquer your shadow. You accept your shadow and you understand it. And that's what, like, I don't know
that's
if
so good.
people necessarily change per se, but I think you start to realize your patterns
Hmm.
more than that you change. So you realize, like, if I go down this path, my shadow takes over. The things I don't like about myself take over and I can't stop
Mm,
that momentum. So
yeah,
that's how you change. You don't actually, like, you don't change your shadow. You change your pattern based around your shadow. If that very, very, very nitpicky wording makes sense.
it does. It doesn't. It makes me think of one of the reasons. I mean, similar to that, but I love the Enneagram is because it's a version of that, right? You have your
Mm-hmm.
shadow self, and
Yep.
it's like where you show up in your unhealth versus
Mm-hmm.
where you show up at your best.
Yep.
And that has been such like a tangible tool for me because I'm an Enneagram 9, which is like peacemaker, but it can come with oh my gosh, an immense amount of bad habits of like
Yeah.
people pleasing and like
Mm-hmm.
ignoring myself and just saying yes and then later being resentful because I don't actually want to do that thing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so as you're talking about that, I'm like, yeah, and any of these tools or these theories or whatever that can help us go, oh, wait, we are who we are.
Yeah, because you are.
And that's okay. Like,
Because it is.
you are okay. You are
You
good.
are. You are good and you're great and you're beautiful. And like, if you expect, I mean, it's similar to like when you have kids and you're like, no matter what I do, with being a parent. I think one thing I always hope that I can do is have a conversation. So like, I know I'm going to do stuff that hurts my kids and offends my kids and they need to talk to a therapist about later, just because I exist, because I am who I
Mm-hmm.
am. And like, because everyone has that. There's always some childhood trauma or some childhood wound that you have a part to play in, regardless if you know you're doing it or not. So to me, what's important in that moment is to realize that's going to happen. So how do you make it a conversation? Because if your kids come up to you and later on in life, they're in their 20s or 30s, and they're like, this hurt me when you did this. And you look at them and you say, well, I did the best I could. That conversation is dead at that moment. So you should just know yourself well enough to be like, hey, if my actions made you feel this way, know that that's never something I wanted to communicate to you. And how do I help you to unravel that? Because what you think I had a definition of you is not how I actually define you. So how do I undo this damage that I did to you? Whereas I know lots of people's parents where they're just like, well, did the best I could. And you're like, that doesn't change my trauma. That doesn't change my pain. So you are going to let people down because you exist and you are human. So how do you accept that, treat yourself with love still, and try to at least correct it a little bit as you do it?
Well, and it reminds me of this idea of like, so funny story. I promise this connects, but before I named this, it's both this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
one of the ideas that I had was the mediocre mom of like, you know, how I have all of this fear and like anxiety around trying to be so not even perfect, but like
Everything,
good
just everything.
in
Yep.
every area.
Mhm.
And I've been trying to intentionally over the years of having kids go, how can I like pull back in these areas and just not give a shit
Yes.
so that I have the capacity to show up as an actually good person in the ways that is the most meaningful. And so like I even as I'm hearing you say that, I'm like, yeah, like how do we like release ourselves of that whether it's like masculinity or whatever that the thing is to go, this is just who I am. Like, yes, I can be better. Let me like release we can always be better. Every human
You
can be
can.
better,
Yes.
but we are good. And how do
Correct.
we release ourselves of
Yeah.
that? Like, I'm never going to let anybody down. No, you are.
Yeah. You are.
You
Yep. By
are.
existing, you are. I mean, if you want to go full Richard Rohr with it, one of the most helpful things that I feel like I've ever read from him was almost Western world does everything in a problem-solving mindset. So most pastors will start the Jesus story in Genesis chapter 3, which is the fall of man. So it is very much like, here's the problem, here's how God solved it. And they just completely ignore the first two chapters, which is there was chaos, there was darkness, and look at all the good and beauty that came out of it. Look at all the good and beauty that God created. Look at your foundation. Your foundation is that you were good and you were beautiful. And sure, did things happen in which like evil came into the world, blah, blah, blah? Yes. But if you start in Genesis chapter 3, which is basically you messed up and you're lucky God was willing to fix it, that's a very different foundation. Not that I have any religious trauma. I haven't deconstructed or anything.
I was gonna say, okay, next time,
Yeah.
let's get into
we'll
that.
just discuss deconstruction for like an hour or two and all the fun that comes with it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's years worth of deconstruction for me.
Yay! I get that.
Well, I loved this conversation. I think this is going to be so helpful to so many people, and I'm just glad that and thankful that you were here and willing to be vulnerable and share your story.
Of course. Do you need to ask your last question?
Yeah, I was about to say.
Okay,
so in wrapping up, finally,
yes.
The last segment I have is called ridiculous or relatable. So something completely ridiculous that you do, quirk that you have, but maybe to somebody else is relatable or maybe makes you crazy, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. So being an extreme music fan who studied production stuff, whenever I get into a band, I will find out who produced their album, and then I will do a deep dive on who produced that album and all the other stuff that they touched. So if you're like, oh, wow, I listened to the new Jason Isbell album, I'm like, oh, so you probably like Dave Cobb produced albums. Have you listened to any of the stuff he did with John Prine whenever John Prine came back? Did you listen to The Lone Village? Did you listen to the two albums he did with us? Did you know that he actually owns RCA Studio A, and that was only saved because of Ben Folds back in the early 2000s? Like that's where my mind goes, because clearly if you like a band, you want to know who produced them and how long they've been producing them. Or like, hey, Weather Vanes, Jason Isbell produced that by himself. It was the first album in a long time he did without Dave Cobb. Do you think that changed the tone of the album? And people are just like, yeah, I just like this one song. And I'm like, oh, you aren't over analyzing who his producers are? Like, you don't want to discuss early 2000s indie folk and if Tucker Martine was like the greatest producer of the Decemberists and Sufjan Stevens, or if they did better with different producers. You don't want to, sure. No,
get into that.
You don't want to, it's not a common thought. If you didn't look up who produced Jimmy Eat World and how many albums he produced and who else he worked on and then got it. Yeah, nope, that's me.
No, that's right, just cool. You. Okay. That is so funny. So. I will say that's not relatable to me personally.
It shouldn't be.
But I have met others. I know one other person that does similar.
Who is it?
Thomas, my friend Thomas.
Did you ever meet Thomas? Okay. I don't think so, yeah.
I feel like you and Thomas would get along very well.
Yeah.
But he does it also with movies. So he's like music and movies. Yeah. He knows the producer or he'll know like the director and he could tell you all the connections. And I'm like, I don't know how you guys keep that in your heads, but
yeah. You didn't listen to a lot of early 2000s Saddle Creek albums and know who appeared on which albums and whatnot and all of that stuff? You don't,
no.
Whenever it's like, hey, here's the choir in this Bright Eyes song, you don't remember every member of the choir and what other bands they were in?
No.
You're good.
But I am really connected with like actors or actresses. And so as soon as we watch something, I'm like, oh, that's the person from that.
Yeah.
And Bennett's like, how do you know everybody? I'm like,
I don't know. Just put me on a trivia team and it'll help.
Oh, well, so good to talk to you today. Thank you for being here.
Of course, gladly.
And I just want to say thank you so much to Devon for being here. If you want to listen to Devon and hear more about his experiences and talks with other fathers, you can listen to the Imperfect Dads podcast on Apple, on Spotify, or even on YouTube. You can also find them on Instagram at the Imperfect Dads podcast. And thank you to each of you for being here as well. I can't tell you how much it means to me that you would take time out of your day to be here and to listen along. And if you haven't done so already, please take a minute to subscribe and leave a quick rating and review of the show on Apple Podcasts by clicking the link in the show notes below. Not only is this super impactful for the show, but it also really helps others who might be struggling with some similar things to find us. And I love hearing from each of you. So please follow the show on Instagram at It's Both Podcast to join the conversation and get behind the scenes content. You can also send me an email directly at itsbothpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening. And remember, it's okay to feel all the things because so many times in life, it isn't either or, it's both.